My name is Michael Richter, and I am here to deliver you my persuasive speech. The title is Time for a Change. Now, I want you to think of this word, terrorism. When you hear that, what do you think of? Fear? Terror? People driving planes into buildings? Well, when I think of it, I think of something completely different. You may have heard about this horrible story that happened quite a few years ago. There was this man, well, young man actually, and he was left in the middle of the woods to die. And unfortunately, he did perish. He was beaten, drugged, cut, and tied to a fence, naked, left for nothing. His name was Matthew Shepard, and he was left there because he was a homosexual, or in lighter terms, gay. Men in his area, they beat him up. They took him out. They pretty much helped him kick that bucket. Well, that's what I think of when I think of terrorism. I'm not thinking of people that are far away, that are flying those planes over here to blow up over our soil. I'm thinking of the terrorism that we incur on each other every day. And a huge part of that terrorism is homophobia. Now, homophobia is simply just a discrimination against homosexuals. Now, gay men can be homophobic, straight, women, kids, animals, anybody can be that. The problem with homophobia is it is a growing problem in our nation today. Now, women, they had their turn. Men, yeah, well, they always never had a problem. The African Americans, oh yeah, they definitely went through it. Well, now, it's the homosexual crowd. They're the ones that are having that horrible charge of discrimination that the African Americans had 50 years ago. We don't need another Martin Luther King to make this better. All we need is somebody to realize that this is a problem. Homophobia is a leading cause of serious issues here in America. Teenage suicides, high school dropouts, just loss of jobs, just everything can be caused. Homophobia can just cause a huge problem. And this growing problem is something we need to fix today. Now, homophobia doesn't start when I wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm going to hate gay people. It starts with me as a child. It starts with anyone as a child. And it starts in that child's own home. Now, when a child is growing up, they're going to be around parents. Now, their parents, what they're going to do is they're going to sit there, and if they are what you call homophobic, they're going to make comments. They're going to say, God hates fags. They're going to say that God does not want homosexuals to be out there. Well, believe it or not, that sticks in the child's mind. And that child is going to take it to school. Now, in school is where we have an even bigger problem. These children are going to sit here, and they're going to go ahead and spread it. They're going to spread it to all their friends and all their faculty members. And really, faculty, they're already grown up. They know what's going on, but they don't care. Did you know most teachers, about 85% of teachers, opposed the idea of bringing into a curriculum of loving gay people, or in all words, just pretty much banning homophobia? They oppose that. Well, if those teachers are opposing it, how are we even going to teach these children? Well, the children definitely are not learning. So what they're doing is they're harassing their, classmates, and these classmates are getting upset. And once it's in there, they become bullies. Now, in elementary school, it's not that big of a deal, but as kids grow up and they become in middle school and high school, it becomes a huge problem. I remember it myself when I was in high school, even middle school. I was tormented, harassed, and at times I wanted to quit. But I did, and I kept going. So, really, it put me back to feeling I was all alone. Because these terrorists, they were terrorizing me. And I've heard of people committing suicide, dropping out, losing their lives over this because they just forget that they are who they are. And it all started here in school. Now, what can we say? We can start groups, we can make it get better, but it wasn't working. And these kids grew up. Now, as they grew up, they took that homophobia with them. Well, where else will they take it, right? Because nothing just disappears on its own. It has to be helped to disappear. Well, adults, they have a big problem there because they just brought into their adult life. And that can be everywhere from work to neighborhoods to friendships, and it ruins a lot of things because, if I was a straight man, I was homophobic, and I married a woman who loved gay men, then there'd be a big problem there, wouldn't there? Well, that's what happens in the workplace, for example. there was a survey done, and this survey was a horrible, horrible thing because what happened was so many people said that they would not even hire gay men or women. What happened was they tested 191 employers, and 18% said they would fire gay or lesbian women, or men, of course. 27% said they would refuse to hire, and 26% would refuse to promote somebody that was gay, lesbian, or bisexual. Well, oh my gosh. That's a big problem because homophobia was just brought into the workplace. People were terminated, refused to be hired. Well, that's ruining people's lives right there. There's also, when you're older, you can do so much more damage. And that's what happened to Matthew Shepard. He was an adult. And adult people hurt him. So, think about it. It's not just in the workplace. It's also in every day. Because he was just enjoying himself in a bar. And he was beaten. And beaten to death, that was. And now his family has to live without him. And he could have had a wonderful life. So you got to think about it. It started as those kids and it was brought into adulthood. Well, these adults only made it worse. And believe it or not, you know, it's just not a good thing. I mean, do I have to say much more? Yeah, I do actually, because it's not going to stop just with me. And everybody has to realize that it has to keep being helped. Because, as we talked about so far, people are going to miss work, they're going to get fired, they're going to get beaten up, they're going to miss school and drop out, even commit suicide. We can't let this go on. And don't even get me started on the neighborhood issues. There's been so many accounts of people being pushed out of their neighborhoods just because they were gay. Neighborhood associations wouldn't like them, so they'd find ways to get rid of them. Well, there's another form of homophobia for you. But it should no longer be tolerated in the United States society, and we should no longer put up with this type of discrimination. Nobody wants terrorists in this country, and I sure as hell don't. And that's why we have a solution for you. Homosexuals, well, we're people too, and we have that choice. Just like Negroes did, just like women did. Well, now, we are gay Americans. And gay Americans deserve the right for laws to protect them against discrimination. They deserve the sexual orientation laws for work, so they won't be fired, or refused for hire, or refused for promotion, or lowered wages just because they're gay, or lesbian, or bisexual, or even transgender. They also need to have discrimination laws for if somebody is beaten up, it's labeled as a hate crime. Just like if I was being a Caucasian was to beat up an African American, it would be labeled as a hate crime. Well, if a straight person beat me up for being gay, it should be labeled as a hate crime. We need those protections. We need that. And there are lobbyists day in and day out. And there are times that these laws are passed and then they're rejected, and back and forth, just like it was with African Americans 50 years ago. But is it going to take 50 years for this to fully happen? It shouldn't. We just have to make sure it works even faster. We need to have the laws protecting our students, protecting the kids from bullies in schools, making sure the teachers actually protect them, not sitting there and turning their backs just because they don't agree with facing homophobia and making a stop. Teachers need to be taught, kids need to be taught, employers need to be taught, adults need to be taught. The average American every day needs to be taught that this is a huge problem. There should be no more tolerance for this anywhere. And we need to start it here in this country and then branching out into the world. Well, that's our solution. I mean, it's time for a change. Just like it was time for a change when Martin Luther King Jr. was here. Just like it was time for a change when the Daughters of the Revolution. It was time for a change when the women were given the right to vote. Time for a change when African Americans were given the right to own property. Well, now it's time for a change for gay Americans to be given the right to be gay and be accepted. Just make sure that you understand where I'm coming from, because nobody wants to hear the word terrorism in our country. Think about it. When you hear terrorism, are you afraid? Because I sure am. Don't be a problem. Be a solution. Don't be that terrorist. Be an American.